Hi there, my name is Denny, and welcome to a Dungeon Master Roundtable edition of the Speak Dicely podcast. I'm joined by some of my peers from the D&D YouTubeverse with the intention of asking them some questions about D&D and tabletop. But before we get to that, I'd like to give them the chance to introduce themselves and the channels that they come from.
Hi, I'm Fred Wheeler. I run the How to D&D YouTube channel. I am on Facebook and Twitter. You might find me on Twitch TV, but I don't use it because I pretty much can't trust my players to say anything, anywhere, without getting me into trouble. So that's where you'll find me. And I talk about everything Dungeons & Dragons.
How's it going? No fun allowed. And I don't cause any trouble with my sort of videos. I cover the gambit of D&D, other tabletop role-playing games, and I cover modules and how to run the game.
I'm Steely. I do lore shorts and live streams of the D&D modules.
Well, thank you all for joining me here today. So we are going to be covering some questions about encounters over the next few episodes. And this first one I've got for you guys here today. So we all know about goblins and kobolds, but what is a less commonly used low-level monster or creature that you'd like to use or have used in an encounter? And what is interesting about them, and how would you or did you use them? And Fred, if you'd like to take us off with that.
Sure. Okay, so I've kind of answered this question before on other channels, and so therefore I'm going to partly cheat and partly not. Troglodytes would be my answer if I was talking in the past, but since that's not going to be any good to you, I'm going to go with lizard folk. I think lizard folk are reasonably... You can transition out goblins and kobolds for lizard folk reasonably easy. I mean, they do have their own sort of terrain area that they function within. Essentially easy replaceable if you wanted to do it that way. Frankly, that's not the pick I would go with. I would probably do a lot of homebrew and change things around a lot and go a bit more wacky. I'd go Modrons, frankly. It doesn't fit in the slightest with goblins and kobolds, and therefore you would have to change your environment and do a lot of changes. But I like Modrons because there's a lot of options. There's not just one type. You get the mono drone, and then you got the duo drone, and blah blah blah. So they have different functions. They operate slightly differently. They're also bizarre in the way they operate. In terms as a monster, they're more sort of lore focused. They're more structured than a lot of the other monsters that you come across, and so they're also very predictable if you know anything about them. So you can be guaranteed that you could probably negotiate with Modrons, and as long as you're not screwing with the mechanism and you're not playing with the order and messing things up, you can get away with quite a lot, and you'd never ever have to do anything like pull out a sword or throw a spell or anything like that. I think that's far more interesting. I found that to be very much the case when I've used them in the past, and you can get a mixture of people doing everything from befriending them, enslaving them, maybe that's not such a great thing, killing them, or just negotiating with them, finding the terms that they will work with, and just go with that. So yeah, Modrons are probably the one that I would go with for this.
Yeah, that's a good answer too. Like, they also have that great parade in their lore, right? So they can end up basically anywhere.
It's the march, the Modron march.
The Modron march. Yeah, oh, that's a great idea.
They're funny too because there's only actually so many of them. There's only so many Modrons, and so when they are destroyed, they return to Mechanus. And so you're thinking, oh, all right, that Modron's gone. Well, it's kind of not really gone. And it's odd that they have sort of a set number of them.
Wow. Well, Modron's great choice. Trevor, how about you?
I like me a good old cockatrice. So cockatrice are fun because they present a clear and present danger that they petrify people. And if you tell your players, oh yeah, those things are basically like mini basilisk, then your players are going to freak out. They're like, oh, they're going to petrify us? Why are you sending something that petrifies us at level 1? But they only petrify for a measly 24 hours. So you can have those fun engagements where one or multiple of the party gets petrified, or maybe you get a scenario where it is an air quote TBK, but it's just the party gets petrified and they wake up 24 hours later and they're like, oh, what's going on? I think cockatrices, whether that be a single one being, just out in the wild, or it being a pet for somebody, or just a flock of cockatrices, I think that those make for pretty unique encounters that aren't deadly natively, but if your players don't know them, then they think that they're like the scariest things ever of all time.
Wow, I must have overlooked them myself going through the monster manual because I didn't realize they just petrified for 24 hours.
Yeah, that's I think a lot of people just see the petrification. They're like, oh, it's just like it's just a mini basilisk there.
Yeah, it's like, why wouldn't I just use a basilisk if we're going to do it? Okay. Like it. And Steely, what did you come up with?
So my favorite low-level creature that I try not to overuse is awakened animals. Animals are awesome, and they have various CRs. A rhino is like a CR3. You got mammoths. And then you also have snakes, squirrels, things like that. And the great thing about awakened animals is the party never knows how to approach them. They have to get to know them before they decide how to deal with them. So if they see a goblin or a kobold, they will assume that it's going to be a combat. There's those rare examples where it's friendly, and those are unique and interesting. But with an animal, it's like, I have no idea if the squirrel is, nice or evil or, So awakened animals, it feels kind of like a cheat answer because there's so many animals, but I love the way, and animals are cool. Animals are cool. So a talking animal is awesome.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like when players approach animals, they're usually like, "Aw, it's cute." But then if you start using intelligent animals, it's like, I don't know anymore.
Exactly.
Now I'm just thinking of the woodland friends from South Park.
Start sacrificing.
Oh my gosh.
Could you imagine you come across a scene, there's a little awakened cub and squirrels and whatever else, they're hacking up a body.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
Holy, just make that a happy tree friends.
Exactly. And especially if you have like a hippie in the party, like a druid, and they're like, oh, I love nature, but these things are like evil. What do I do?
Oh, I might have to steal that one. That's great. And the creatures I came up with that I've recently started using are Kruthix, which are a monster that is in the Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. And these are like 6-legged insectoid lizard monstrosity hybrids that tunnel through the earth and eat and kill anything and anyone that they come across. And though their stat blocks are quite basic, they're very plain, but what I like about them is that they have an air of mystery because it's like, where did they come from? What is their goal? Like, they're so alien in appearance, and yet their CR is actually quite low. Like, there's 3 varieties, an 1/8, a 2, and a 5. And like, though, if you go up to like level 5, yeah, those things can carry you for a while. But they've also got intelligence to them, which I think could really scare your players. Like, they have the ability to have tactics, pack tactics, their own language, and they tolerate other creature types, which is bizarre for anything that would just look like a monster. But yeah, I've gotten to homebrew some of these things because I wanted a wider variety. So my players out there, you watch out for these things.
I think those are really good examples too of monsters that you can have in a dungeon and it doesn't disrupt the ecology, because oftentimes we want to have dungeons that have variety, but it doesn't make sense for there to be a variety, right?
Oh yeah, these things can tunnel in from anywhere. They can just end up anywhere. Like, they can almost be a pest in a way, but it's just like that nagging, like, what is going on with these things? Well,
you just picked a monster from Dark Sun. That's what's going on with these things. That's a monster that's very much found in the world of Dark Sun, rather than your standard Forgotten Realms adventure or anywhere else. And they are a very odd creature, but then there's a lot of very odd sort of shell-like, insectoid-like creatures in Dark Sun too. I think Sam's choice of going Disney with animals is probably the best one that I could possibly think of. It's like, yeah,
it feels
that was
like
pretty
cheating.
obvious.
So many
I
animals.
mean,
Animals are cool.
go Disney. I mean, heck, it works for them. So,
Are we
Please
gonna
don't
see
eat
a
me.
Wizard of the Coast and D&D collab? What?
Disney buys. Wizards of
Disney
the Coast.
buys Wizard of the Coast?
Everything good is gone. Well, thank you guys for your answers there. And for everybody else, be sure to leave a comment in the video below if you're watching this on YouTube, or head on over to the YouTube video if you're listening to this where you like to listen to podcasts, and let us know what low-level creatures and monsters you like to use in your games that we didn't cover here today. And I shall be back to speak with you soon. Bye-bye. This episode of the Speak Dicely podcast was produced and edited by myself, Teni Brant, and the intro and outro music were created by Teni Brant. Thank you for the support, and we'll see you next time on the Speak Dicely podcast.